feel inspired. And this energy will now carry into our first session titled Emergency Food Waivers, Prove Program Expansion Possible. And at this time, we'd like to ask that you turn off your videos now and switch to gallery view, also at the top right of your screen. And we'll do this for the rest of the morning so we can showcase our speakers as a panel. Now, I am excited to introduce the Reverend Valerie Webster with the Episcopal Diocese of Montana as our moderator for this session. Pastor Valerie has served on the Montana Association of Christians since 2012, including a one-year term as the MAC president, and currently serves as MAC's faith representative on the Montana Partnership to End Childhood Hunger. Valerie, you always find the right words. You bring passion and energy that I miss when you're not in the room. And you go the extra mile to make a difference for kids and families in Montana. I will gladly hand it over to you now.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It is my absolute privilege to introduce you to Lorianne. Raised in scenic Darby, Montana, and now living in Missoula, Lorianne calls Western Montana and the spectacular Bitterroot Mountains home. The Chief Policy Officer of the Montana Food Bank Network, Lorianne lives the Golden Rule, empowering Montanans to care for their hungry neighbors as they would wish to be cared for if they were hungry. Specifically, she informs Montanans about hunger and about programs to alleviate hunger so that they can be effective anti-hunger advocates for our neighbors. She builds relationships among community partners, just like she's doing today, so that we can work more effectively together. And she speaks to our elected representatives in Helena and Washington, D.C. regarding policy and programs to reduce hunger in Montana. Lorianne, thank you not only for joining this Partnering to End Childhood Hunger Summit, but for a demeanor in your leadership at the Montana Food Bank Network, through the Food Security Council, through your relationship with MT-PECH, and in so many ways across the whole state. Your spirit and can-do passion is just wonderful. Thank you. To begin, might you share a story from your life that helps us to know why you are so passionate about feeding the hungry?
Hi, Valerie, thank you. I really had trouble thinking of a particular story. I've been very fortunate to not have experienced food insecurity directly in my life, but I also recognize the enormous role of chance and luck in that experience, and try not to take for granted the resources and the privileges that I have had in my life. Like I'm sure all of us, I have seen both personally and in the work that I've been doing for the last 10 years at this point, just how quickly lives get turned upside down, and how hard it is for people to get back on their feet. I have seen friends and loved ones, how hard people can work day after day just to survive without being able to get ahead, and that feels very wrong to me. My background in sociology, I think, has helped to inspire a particular interest in the role that government programs and policies play in either helping people find stability or in making things harder. So hopefully this work helps to bridge some of that disconnect, helps to bring better understanding around who faces hunger and why, so that we don't so easily dismiss people who are struggling and actually create stronger public policy. On a more personal level, having a baby who's newly a year old, the thought of not having the resources that I need to provide everything for that little baby it's crushing. And so the thought that there are parents across this state who are living that reality and wondering if they'll have enough for their family and for their loved ones. I think that's the reason that we are all doing this work, and I think this work makes a difference. So I'm grateful to be doing it with all of you.
Right. So I'm wondering, how have federal nutrition programs responded to the pandemic?
Nutrition programs are always, of course, so essential for our country and for the well-being of families, but we have really seen them play an enormous role during the pandemic in particular. And so as soon as it became clear that COVID was going to have an impact in the US and the way that we started to anticipate back in March, Congress moved quickly to pass the Families First Act to try to give some support to those struggling families and to bolster local economies. And that package included a number of provisions around housing and extended and enhanced unemployment insurance benefits, paid leave on a more national scale, which was pretty exciting to see, as well as really important changes to our public nutrition programs, recognizing that SNAP, that school meals, that those programs that we have that exist nationwide really are the most effective way that we can get food directly to those in need, and they're great ways to stimulate local economies. So Congress passed numerous waivers and flexibilities for our existing programs, and also created a couple of new programs to help fill in the gaps.
The supplemental, thank you very much. And if anybody has a question that we don't quite get to, feel free to put it in the chat. And in this time we've got, I'll try to weave that in. But thank you for helping us understand that. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, is our nation's largest and most impactful anti-hunger program. How has SNAP responded to the crisis?
SNAP has had a few really important changes and flexibilities added. So during the height of the crisis, Montana was able to implement some simplified application procedures to make it easier for families and individuals to access SNAP, also making it easier for caseworkers who are working to process all of these applications. We're also able to extend certification timelines so that families weren't unintentionally dropping off of SNAP benefits when their typical 6-month recertification came up. So pushing some of those deadlines and streamlining paperwork where we could helped keep people connected to the program. Another really important change that's been allowed at the state level has been emergency SNAP allotments. So recognizing that SNAP benefits are often inadequate during the best of times to afford food. Right now, SNAP benefits have been bolstered a little bit with those emergency allotments. And so what that means is that everyone who's currently participating in SNAP or newly applying, newly eligible, will receive the maximum allotment for their household size. So everyone gets kind of bumped up to that max allotment. However, the downside of that structure is that the lowest income SNAP households, which is about 40% of SNAP households, were already receiving the max allotment for their household size. So the lowest income SNAP households did not see an increase, but for many families, that max allotment has been a really important provision. However, the state has to make the request to do emergency allotments to USDA on a monthly basis, so it's only 1 month that's approved at a time. So there's also no real long-term stability in those emergency allotments. One of our most important opportunities to strengthen SNAP was not included in the Families First Act. So to just quickly highlight the current ask that we're hoping Congress will include in a next round of COVID relief is a temporary 15% boost to SNAP benefits for all SNAP households that would stay in place for as long as the economy is weak. And we saw a similar response during the ARA relief package after the Great Recession. A temporary boost to SNAP for all SNAP families would then kind of lift that benefit for the 40% who haven't seen an increase, and would provide longer term stability, being tied to economic indicators as opposed to a month after month renewal.
Great, thank you very much. From Mary, we hear, can farmers who have surpluses somehow connect to the program? Isn't this a distribution program? If they no longer have restaurant orders, couldn't farmers be involved in co-op and redistribute food through these lines, such as the Montana Growers Co-op?
There have been a number of opportunities or programs trying to better connect farmers to individuals in need, and we'll actually touch on a few of those in a couple of questions, talking more specifically about food banks and also the new Farmers to Families Food Box program. So hold just a little bit on that and see if we answer your question better by the end.
Great, thank you. And when schools closed in March, there was an immediate concern for kids losing access to school meals. How have school meal programs been able to respond? Yeah,
schools have had to shift in so many ways trying to respond to this pandemic, but school meals have been one really important component of all of that. So when schools closed last March, schools, rightfully so, was kind of an immediate outpouring of concern of, well, if kids are going home, what does that mean for access to school meals? Which is a valid concern and one that we should keep in mind every summer and every school holiday, as kids also lose access to school meals on a regular basis, not just during the pandemic, but this in particular highlighted that concern. So when schools closed last March, schools were able to shift quickly some were able to do home delivery options, or at least kind of bus route delivery options, or at least make meals available for pickup at schools for families to come pick up for their kiddos for the day or for the week. A really important provision, though, that was allowed through some of those the federal flexibilities was to allow schools to provide meals under the summer food program, which is a simpler program to administer, and it's simpler to participate in. It just provides free meals to all kids, so there's no paperwork and kind of tracking on the school end to track paid, reduced, and free, and then there's no paperwork and effort on the part of the families. Just meals are free to all kids. A few other specific important flexibilities that then needed to fall under the summer food program was to allow meals to operate in a non-congregate setting. So typically under summer food, families have to come and have the kids eat on site in a congregate setting. So of course, right now that is impractical for many reasons. So that there was a non-congregate waiver that was really important. Also allowing families to pick up more than one meal at a time was really important, as families are dealing with all of the stresses of home remote learning and working from home and a million other things. Trying to get to schools to pick up a meal each day is pretty impractical as well. So allowing schools to provide multiple meals at once. And then even just little changes like allowing parents to pick up meals on behalf of children. Normally the children would have to be present, but there was a waiver allowing parents to just pick up on behalf of their kids. So all of those flexibilities have made it easier to operate the program in a way that meets the needs of families. Also, by allowing meals to be provided under summer food rather than the National School Lunch, that expanded the opportunity for community organizations to provide meals as well. So providing additional locations for pickup or delivery through those community partners. So over the summer then, those changes for summer food had a really tremendous impact on how well summer food was able to reach kids across Montana. So in July of 2020, summer food served more than 800,000 meals to kids across Montana, which is more than double the number of meals that went out in July of 2019. In July of 2019, it was fewer than 400,000. Summer food is an awesome, important program that really fills a gap during the summer, but it's always difficult to participate in for a variety of reasons, difficult to access. So those flexibilities that we saw in place this summer, the non-congregate, the allowing multiple meals, all of those changes helped really make summer food responsive to families. And as a result, we saw far more meals go out. And then as schools prepared to go back for school year 2021, our current school year, we really recognized the need to continue those flexibilities allowed under summer food. So schools and advocates across the country put a lot of pressure on USDA, working with our congressional offices, urging them to put pressure on USDA, and they were able to keep those waivers and flexibilities in place throughout our current school year, which was great.
Thank you so much for helping us get that big picture, Lorianne. Is there anything else you might add for kids who are doing remote learning or the hybrid models? Are there any additional supports for those kids?
Yeah, so schools, like I said, are doing an incredible job in getting meals out to kids under such challenging circumstances right now. But it's hard to reach all kids when kids aren't in school every day. And so the number of school meals, or the number of meals during the school year then, is actually down a little bit. So in summer, we were up significantly with the flexibilities for summer food, but during the school year, we're down a little bit compared to normal, just because we don't have kids in school 5 days a week where it's nice and easy to feed them in a cafeteria. So for example, in October of 2020, about 1.8 million meals went out to kids through summer food and school meals, so meals that were provided to kids during the school year, about 1.8 million compared to October of 2019, which was 2.4 million. So we're definitely not serving quite as many meals as we would be in a normal school year. Recognizing that kids are going to have a difficult time accessing meals if they're doing remote learning or hybrid models, Congress authorized Pandemic EBT, which is a super exciting program that allows food benefits to go directly to kids who are participating in free and reduced price meals on an EBT card, and it works just like SNAP. So it's available to kids who are enrolled in free and reduced price meals or at a community eligibility school to help fill that gap of when kids don't have access to the school meal program. So it was initially created just to cover the time frame of March to June of 2020, so the end of last school year. And during that time, benefits went out to essentially all eligible kids because everyone was at home for the most part during that time. So benefits went out, about $330 per eligible child went to families. Benefits went out in somewhere around August or September. But going into the new school year, we recognize that kids are still not going to be in school oftentimes a full 5 days a week in the new school year. So we need Pandemic EBT to continue in some way. So advocates and schools, again, worked with Congress and were able to get an extension of Pandemic EBT to apply to the current school year. There had to be some changes and modifications made to respond to our current realities, which is a little bit different than last spring, but we're able to get that program extended. USDA just provided guidance to states on what kind of the new PEBT model will look like and how it will function in November. And so now states across the country are working to get their individual plans put together as far as when benefits will go out, how much those benefits will be, how kids get enrolled, all of those details. DPHHS and Montana OPI, I'm sure, are working hard on right now to try to get ironed out. So that's been a pretty exciting program, though, to see those benefits going directly to families with kids.
Thank you. You just have all that information in your head, and we really appreciate it. And Jamie Kaskundi would like to know, if a school does not collect financial information from families for school nutrition programs, can that affect the school's Title I status going into 2021 or the 2021-2022 year?
Yeah, and I don't know the details on this other than I know USDA is working on guidance for schools, recognizing that there will definitely be a gap in having great free and reduced price data this school year. So I think someone mentioned the importance of still asking families to submit free and reduced price applications, and really that is a good way to do it. If it's not too much work for the schools and for the families to have that paperwork to fill out, it ensures that the free and reduced price numbers for the schools are still on file. And to participate in Pandemic EBT, I believe that kids will need to be enrolled in free and reduced price meals by a particular date. So even though it's a little bit counterintuitive to say that we don't need this because meals are free to all kids, we also do still need it for a variety of reasons. So if you can share that information with families, that it is still worth applying for free and reduced price meals, especially to make sure they get access to PEBT. I think that's important, but also to just reiterate that I know USDA does recognize that free and reduced price data this school year is just going to be thrown off. And so I think they're working on trying to figure out how to adjust Title I status and some of those other indicators that depend on it.
Thank you so much for that clarification. We appreciate it. Montana's food pantries have played an important role as well. Has federal support impacted community food distributions?
Yeah, so it's been in the same way that it's been so impressive and inspiring to see the schools respond and continue to provide meals to families in need. It's been similar for Montana's food pantries. They have really been able to adjust and come up with new distribution models and adjust to changes in volunteer availability. So many depend on older volunteers who are no longer available for just health and safety reasons. But food pantries across the state, by and large, have been able to make it work. They are still getting food out to the families and the people in their community who need that assistance. And the role of USDA and federal support has been pretty huge for these food pantries. USDA commodities are always a really important source of food for Montana's food pantries. But particularly right now, as it's been challenging to order food, as our food system is experiencing many delays, and we're recognizing some of the gaps that exist. It's been harder to purchase food. Food prices have gone up. Donations have just fluctuated a lot, depending on what's happening with markets for farmers, as someone mentioned previously, and whether there's grocery product to be donated, or if grocery stores are seeing higher demand and they have less to donate. All of those factors have really made kind of our traditional sources of donated and purchased food just more unpredictable. So USDA foods then have played an even more important role in providing a good, solid, steady source of food for Montana's food banks. And so the most kind of ongoing, consistent way that USDA commodities support food banks is through TFAP, the Emergency Food Assistance Program, which provides commodities to food pantries and meal programs. And so as part of the Families First Act, as well as the CARES Act passed by Congress, they included some additional funding for TFAP commodities in those bills, allowing greater purchase of food from Montana's farmers, so helping to purchase additional surplus products to try to stabilize some of those ag markets, and then distributing that excess product through our food bank system. So additional TFAP funding was really key. And then also, like I mentioned, there was the creation of another new program, the Farmers to Families Food Box Program, which was part of a bigger relief package to farmers, and kind of the same type of model as TFAP, buying products directly from farmers to be distributed through community partners. Although a lot more flexibility than TFAP, the Farmers to Families Food Boxes was available to distribute without any income guidelines. It could be distributed through a variety of community locations. A little bit more flexible that way. And also the products that were sourced for Farmers to Families were really high quality, beautiful products, a lot of fresh produce, dairy, pre-cooked meats. There were definitely some logistical challenges in getting that food across the state, and just trying to figure out distribution logistics of a new program in such a short turnaround, and working with different vendors. Some challenges for sure, but the overall response from the communities that participated was great. And so we worked with a variety of partners through our network across the state to help distribute about 4.7 million pounds of food across 15 counties through the Farmers to Families Food Box Program. And again, that's the food that primarily did go out, I believe, through the Montana Food Bank Network, different partners, but there were a few other community sites as well.
Wow. Thank you.
Sorry, one more note I just remembered with support for food banks. So that Farmers to Families Food Box Program is wrapping up. It'll be concluded at the end of this month. The additional TFAP money that was authorized through Families First and the CARES Act is close to being spent out. We've been getting some additional food through trade mitigation food purchases through USDA. That's also ending at the end of this calendar year. So a lot of that additional USDA support to food banks is wrapping up at the end of this calendar year. Feeding America is estimating that going into 2021, we could be looking at a 50% decrease in the amount of USDA food going out through food banks across the country. So just another kind of note going forward for Congress, one of our key asks right now is to give, again, another support for the TFAP commodity program as a great way to get food out through our food banks while also supporting our farmers. So recognizing we need Congress to do more for our public food programs going forward, but also to recognize that food banks are still kind of on the front lines of this crisis, and we're about to see an enormous decrease in the food available.
Lorianne, Lisa Lee asks, will the Farmers to Family Food Box Program, to your knowledge, start up again in the spring?
Not to my knowledge. Everything that we have heard so far is that there'll likely be some additional aid to farmers, but it will not include the Farmers to Families Food Box Distribution Program. So That could certainly change as things move forward, but I believe right now it's expected to conclude at the end of this calendar year.
So knowing about how so many things are concluding now or will be in the very near future, and the decrease in resources that you will have available, it's been extraordinary how everybody's risen to the occasion. What gives you hope looking ahead to 2021? And how can everybody on this call be a part of making that hope happen?
I'm hopeful that we can take what we have learned from this pandemic and do better going forward. We have seen the severe shortcomings and gaps in our food system. We've seen the importance of having a really strong and robust social safety net in place. And we've seen the reality that we have millions of people in this country who are living paycheck to paycheck, and the instant crisis that's created when there's an unexpected loss of income or a health concern. And while right now, of course, we're seeing that crisis on an unprecedented worldwide scale, I think we just need to remember that those individual crises happen for people every day. And so to have stronger systems in place on an ongoing basis will hopefully help to make things better for people going forward, that we can take this opportunity to learn, to see the program changes that we've been able to make. Congress passed the Families First Act and made really important changes, created new programs, and they did it in a bipartisan way. I mean, in a matter of days, maybe weeks. Those are great changes that we would love to see going forward. Now we have this case study, this example to be able to show these are real policy changes that we put in place that helped families, that streamlined administration. Let's see what we can do to make some of these permanent. Over the next few years, Congress will be working on Farm Bill and child nutrition reauthorization, and we'll have a really great chance to advocate for some longer term change.
Thank you very much, Lorianne. And we've had some wonderful further questions, and I'll just raise one from Mary Stein. I'm so curious about what worked well and what challenges were most significant regarding distribution channels with the Farms to Families program. Are any reports or reflections being written up or plans to do so? Do you know about that, Lorianne? Or maybe others later in the program can share?
Yeah, I think Stephanie Staley is probably on the call and can answer in more detail. If I miss anything key, Stephanie, feel free to jump in. But I think the challenges were largely around the fact that it was a new program that was put in place very quickly without a lot of guidance as to exactly how it would work and how it would look. So we were working directly with vendors who had the food boxes that they accessed from the farmers to the vendors to the community distribution points. And so those vendors were organizations that we didn't necessarily have relationships with, and they had not necessarily been in any sort of program like this before. So it was a lot of figuring out how to get that food product. A lot of our vendors, I think all of our vendors were from out of state, from different states. So trying to figure out just the logistics of how we're getting the food into Montana, and then how we're getting it to the food pantries who need it, how they're going to distribute it. Being fresh product, it needed cold storage, so we had to rent a variety of refrigerated tractor trailers to be able to store the food boxes so that the food pantries could distribute them. I think Stacy Brown from Family Service is on as well and did some of those distributions. So just a lot of on-the-ground logistics had to be put in place very quickly.
Lorianne, thank you so much for your sharing today. And now, Lisa, I'll hand it back over to you, but this was so informative. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I second that. Wow. There's just so much information shared in 30 minutes in a way we can actually all digest it. So thank you for that. I sat back with my coffee and really enjoyed that.